It's the 24th of June, 2024. I just said bye to my grandparents who I wasn't going to see for another year, on my way to live in a foreign land. It wasn't exile, but rather a dream come true. For 5 years I was planning with my best friend through countless calls, figuring out how I could meet back up with him and study architecture. I had accepted an internship and was coming to meet him in Tokyo. Finally, it was all coming together. That year in Japan changed my life. Now allow me to introduce myself. Never mind. My name's Arthur. I'm an architecture student studying in France. And for my final project, I'll be making a comic about Tokyo. Now, you probably have a couple questions, like, isn't architecture about plans and stuff? Why a comic? Where in Tokyo? Well, I'll be answering these questions eventually, but first, let's start at the beginning. Question: to what point are you willing to stop living your life in order to preserve it? This is a question I would ponder regularly when I lived in Japan. And in order to explain why, I'm going to tell you a little story. So at the beginning of my stay in Japan, I was actually crashing at my best friend Keita's place for the duration of my internship. And we'd often be up at 4 a.m. in the morning to go to the gym and then get ready for work. And we actually had a very good reason for doing this. See, at the time, we used to live in a place called Hachioji, which is all the way over here. Where we worked was all the way over in this area here. This meant we had to catch the train early to make it on time to work. So we joined the masses and rode the Chuo line in the morning, oftentimes having nowhere to sit for the entirety of the trip. But it was in those moments that I saw how everybody fit in, how everything was similar, as though everyone was a cell in the same organism. White shirts, black pants and shoes, same haircut, same gestures. One could see this as something positive, and the driver behind Japan's cleanliness, order, and efficiency. After all, in a country historically plagued by disasters, the machine needs to run smoothly in and out of these situations, effectively protecting life in the face of existential threat. But this imminent and unexpected disaster seems to control nearly all of their decisions, all the way down to the way they dress and even communicate. Individuals are not truly individuals, and this brings me back to my existential question. To what point are you willing to forego living your life in order to preserve it? It seems like Japan has always run on this apprehension born ultimately from its environment, and has spread ever more with the advent of new technology, now dictating most of their way of life. Architecture is a reflection of its society, and I believe that this issue of the spirit has affected Tokyo's built environment as well. Seriously, for every beautiful traditionally designed shrine or machiya, there are probably about 10,000 boring, copy-paste concrete residential blocks or shopping malls. This is not good urbanism. Malls aren't the epitome of a thriving society, but rather the symptoms of one seeking escapism and meaning through consumerism. In fact, the places and buildings that still have a soul are slowly being eaten up in favor of more profitable corporate and chain businesses. This replacement doesn't just affect the human aspect of the city, but is also having consequences on other important fronts such as biodiversity and the overall sustainability of Tokyo. So an example of this is actually what happened to Tokyo's old river network. So here's a cool little fact. According to Professor Hidenobu Jinnai at Hosei University, Tokyo actually used to look more like Venice during the Edo period. Canals and rivers ran throughout the city, acting not only as transport systems, but also likely kept Tokyo cooler during hot summers and supported local ecosystems. I mean, look at this. This image, while not from the Edo period, is Shinjuku, which now looks like this. When Tokyo rapidly urbanized post-war, they went against nature and buried these rivers with construction debris and concrete. Now, while I understand that there are flood risks that had to be taken into account, I still don't believe this to be the optimal solution. Nowadays, the rivers that remain are sparse and weak, no longer supporting the same life they once did. Tokyo is also a massive heat island, contributing to the severe heat and humidity during the summers. Check out this land surface temperature map from NASA's Landsat. We can see the huge difference between the urban temperatures and the rural temperatures. This is the result of an overabundance of heat-absorbing surfaces such as concrete and asphalt, as well as a lack of vegetation, which reflects sunlight and cools the surrounding area through a process known as evapotranspiration. Tokyo's average temperature has increased 5 times the global average in the past 100 years, so at around 2.86 degrees Celsius since 1900. Now, I think those facts are just the tip of the iceberg in terms of urban and environmental issues that Tokyo is facing and that are worth addressing. And for a society that is touted as respecting nature, I think they've kind of forgotten that here in exchange for stability, which I don't blame them for, but at the same time is having huge consequences on their social and existential health as a result. But that's enough with numbers. Let's zoom in a little bit more and let me keep telling you about the story. I work specifically in a neighborhood west of Shinjuku in the Suginami ward, 1 hour out from Hachioji, called Koenji. I had heard a few vague things about this place, namely for its local music culture and its vintage clothing stores. There was something very inherently attractive about this place, though at the time, I couldn't put my finger on it. It was quaint and at a much smaller scale than the rest of Tokyo, so I guess it made me comfortable. It's the kind of place where you can hop into a random basement bar and see a local budding artist play live, while a guy who's been there 30 years makes you drinks with a cast of eclectic regulars. However, the excessive concrete and paved surfaces that plagued the rest of Tokyo made even Koenji unbearable during the summer. So as a hairy gaijin, I would often be a walking puddle of sweat. Nevertheless, I walked towards my job, passing by hundreds of similar buildings built for maximum efficiency, all prepackaged with a set floor area and heat pumps. But eventually, I stumbled upon something completely out of place. Almost like it was grafted into the urban tissue, a 2-story antique wooden house sat nestled between 2 monolithic residences, in silent protest to its surroundings. It had a soul. It stood for something. It stood for more than nostalgia, but for an era that embodied a healthier style of being. It was by working there that I also got to roam Koenji more, discovering the soul that this neighborhood had to offer. It's not as photogenic as districts like Ginza or as renowned as districts like Akihabara, but that's just what makes it special. It's quiet, worn, humble, and yet hides such a special feeling of home that I guess is too visceral to really express in words. However, I also learned from a local that the same curse afflicting the rest of Tokyo was also coming for Koenji's soul as well. Old shops and charming commerces are being mindlessly removed to make room for new corporate and chain businesses, and squeaky clean copy-paste residential blocks. All this is an effort to replace derelict buildings, but what replaces them is often representative of something much more pernicious. But Koenji is resisting. Koenji residents are known for preventing gentrification and public works projects from damaging the spirit of their neighborhood. They are probably the most vocal population in Tokyo, putting up petitions and protesting against things they feel aren't right regularly, which is not very common for Japan. Even the mayor of Suginami herself, Kishimoto Satoko, has engaged in protests embodying the spirit of the residents and the neighborhood. And that's where I think the hope lies. The soul comes from remembering our culture and who we are. It also lies in remembering the importance of nature, as that is ultimately where we all come from. This represents the starting point of my final year project. As you'll follow me through this journey, I'll recount to you parts of my life in Japan, as well as my path in constructing my final year project. This journey will be represented in a comic and a couple other documents in its final form, as I believe visuals and stories are the most powerful way to communicate. You might also get to accompany me on a trip to Japan, which will be essential to my research for this project. At the end of the day, my mission is to keep Koenji, while also helping it evolve and adding a bit of myself into it, because after all, that's kind of what an architect does. In any case, thanks for watching, and I hope you'll stick around on this evolving journey on how I'm going to help rebuild part of Koenji. See you soon.